Hello. As I do these short takes on multiple emotions, I want to look at two emotions that should work together. You want to see them working together almost all of the time. And sadly, there are situations in which both of them are out of sorts with each other, and each one creates its own kind of trouble. I'm going to show you these emotions. They're shame and contentment. And before we go, I want to say if you'd like to know why I'm calling this shame instead of guilt, go look at the shame, either the shame post on my site or look at the shame video here. I make, I think, a sterling argument for why we need to look at this emotion as shame and not guilt. So let's look at these two emotions, shame and contentment. Now, these emotions are going to help you live up to the morals and values and the ethics that you agree with. Shame will help you live up to those, and contentment will help you notice that you did. Now, with shame, the most important thing to do in your work with this emotion is to make sure that what you've agreed to is livable, right? And if it is livable, if you have an agreement that I'm going to be kind to people. And you can pretty much do that all the time, except for this one day when you were sarcastic and you thought it was funny, but you ended up hurting someone. And so you feel rightfully ashamed because you have gone against your own moral and ethical structure, right? So at that point, you would have to feel the shame. It's not going to murder you, it'll be okay. It's painful, but it's a meaningful pain. And put your head down and apologize and make amends and fix your behavior, right? And when you do that, your contentment will say, hey, nice job. That was hard. You did a good job, though. And next time we're going to be really more careful when we think something is funny in a sarcastic way, right? So your shame and contentment move back and forth like that, right? So as long as you have something that you can live up to, your contentment will say, nicely done. But what happens with your shame when your agreements and the morals and ethics you've agreed to, you were actually forced into them by authority figures or peers, or they're just terrible agreements? For instance, an agreement that you cannot be loved unless you're perfect. And so somebody comes to love you and you're not perfect, your shame is going to go on a bender. It's going to take a trip to Banana Crackers Town. It is going to drive you out of your mind because it's an impossible thing that you've agreed to, or maybe that you were forced to agree to. And in that situation, the shame isn't the problem. The shame is doing its job. It's the exact same job it did when it was helping you live up to your agreement to be a nice person, right? It's the exact same job. But that agreement was livable. And this one about you can't be loved until you're perfect, it's unlivable. It's gruesome. It's abusive. And so a lot of people see shame involved in this thing, and they think that shame is gruesome and abusive. No, it's not. It's doing its job, right? You've given it a horrible job, or you were forced to give it a horrible job, but it's not the shame's fault. Shame is doing its work. And in that situation where you're trying to live up to this toxic and horrible and abusive, gruesome agreement, I also call them contracts, your contentment is not going to be able to arise. I mean, what are you going to be contented about? You can't do it. So a lot of times when people have a problem with low self-esteem, it's not a problem with contentment. It's that the agreements that they've made are unlivable, and contentment actually doesn't have anything to say because you never do anything that you can feel proud of because the thing is impossible, right? So the practice for shame that's toxic like this, not the shame is not toxic, right? The situation is toxic and the shame is just trapped in it like you are. There's a practice called burning contracts, and I'll put the link to the video for that down below. But basically, you go in and you find these agreements that somehow you signed, somehow you agreed to, and you rescind your agreement, right? You become your own lawyer, and your lawyer throws out this contract because it's garbage. And then you get to make decisions about how you do want to live and when you do. And you've made a contract that you can agree to, like, I will floss every night, right? And you floss and your contentment goes, nicely done. And you say, yes, I agree, right? That's how you and shame can work together in a loving way, right? But for many people, they don't even remember having agreed to these contracts in the beginning, right? So all they see is that shame is acting like an abusive thing. So that's where a lot of this trouble with shame comes from, is people can't see that shame is doing its job. And the job is awful. Shame isn't awful. So here's what it looks like when shame is livable and your contentment is like, yay, you're so good. You just did that. Nicely done. Now go do something else you can be proud of, right? What about if you had too much contentment, right? Would you feel proud of yourself all the time and be in this wonderful situation and blah, blah? No, no. It's like too much shame of the toxic variety is awful, but too much contentment that isn't balanced by shame is just as horrifying. And what we see with a person who can't feel appropriate shame and has too much contentment is bullying and other antisocial behaviors, because shame helps us connect to our morals and ethics, right? And so if you don't have shame, if you're shameless, you will not be a moral or ethical person. And sadly, sometimes when the shame goes down, the contentment moves up. It's like they balance each other. You want them to balance each other beautifully. If the shame is too intense, the contentment will fall away. Nope, you want them here. But if a person has too much contentment and their shame is down, you're going to have someone who's rude, bullying, blaming. They blame everybody because they can't access their own shame. They lie, they steal, they cheat, and there's nothing in their whole emotional realm that can stop them, right? And so this is a person with a severe shame deficit. They need shame. They require shame. And we know this in our language. When we say someone's shameless, that's not an awesome thing. We know this. Even people who hate the word shame and want it all to be guilt know this. Shamelessness is nothing to celebrate. So if you're feeling like, haha, like let's look at me having too much contentment. My agreement with shame, which is a healthy one, is that I'm going to be nice to people. But I get myself in a sarcastic, jokey mood, and I start, putting in some zingers, and people laugh, and I start feeling like, hey, the sun rises out of my humor, and I go further and further, and I'm not watching my victim, the victim of my sarcasm, and that person's getting hurt, but I'm getting accolades for being a jerk, right? A smart, funny, sarcastic jerk. And so my contentment is going to go too high, and I am going to devolve into bullying and jerkiness, right? And so hopefully my shame is going to come up and say, you need to make amends. You have broken the rules. And I'm going to feel pain. It's going to be kind of hot there for a minute. But if I have skills, I'm going to say, yes, I did a terrible thing. I apologize. I was trying to be funny. I liked having people think I was smart. And you got hurt. So that's unacceptable. And I will not do it again. And that's it. I'm sorry. And then you're going to go and you're going to fix your behavior. And maybe your contentment won't come up right away because the person's still injured, right? And you need to feel it for a while. You need to feel ashamed for a while. And you're going to make it through, right? And then let's say the person comes back and says, you did say some funny things, but you really did hurt me. Thank you for your apology. You can go, cool, I don't feel 100% right now, but I can accept that. Thank you. Thank you for accepting my apology, right? So, shame and contentment, you want them here working together at all times. You don't want your contentment too high, or you're going to be a jerk and a bully. You don't want your shame too high, or you're going to feel like you're being bullied, right? They need to balance each other out at all times. It is normal for emotions to work in pairs, groups, and clusters. And for some of them, they require each other for the health of your entire being. Emotions are cool, and all of them, have skills and gifts that will help you live your best life. Welcome them all, for they have been sent as a guide from inside you.